Good morning, folks. Looking forward to today's setup. I was in a rush to get this one done before the new year. Once again, good morning. My name is Charles McNamara. I'm the Director of Operations at Guardian Group Services. Little movement going around. We've got construction next door. We got some moving of the boxes and some storage stuff going on. So my setup is not 100% today, but I do have someone who's committed to you all for 100% of the day. I have a great guest today. His name is Ron Reed. We were supposed to do this last week. I unfortunately had caught a cold. I'm still fighting that cold right now. So this was supposed to happen about a week ago. Great guy today. Looking forward to discussing some things about resumes and recruiting and job placement today. I just want to thank you all for tuning in. I know a lot of you are very busy this holiday season. A lot of you are working double. Some of you are looking for work. And today's training topics are going to talk a little bit about how to get your resume in order. And today's guest, Ron Reed, is a seasoned HR professional. It's a great guy. Ron, good morning.
Good morning, Charlie. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So, flub number one. I know that there are going to be some people that have a critical eye, including you. My original setup for this was a little messed up, so I own it.
No worries, and I'm happy to see my name is spelled correctly there. But
Ron, Ron. So it was a typo.
I've been called worse things in life, so Ron, it's all good.
I was in such a rush to do this because I always, especially this topic in particular, I always feel it can kind of go one or two ways. People are really interested about creating a resume. It's not the most fun or
Mhm.
glamorous thing for employment, but probably one of the most important things. And we'll talk a little bit about your business and what you do at Read Resumes. And for anyone who is interested, I'm going to leave his information up here. The email address will be linked down at the bottom. You could also contact him on LinkedIn. It's a great professional network. But I figured, this would be a good session to talk about. Now, you and I met a couple of years back in the beginning of COVID
Right.
through LinkedIn, and we found we share a lot of contacts in our networks professionally. So I just want to say, thank you for coming back and doing this. I know that you're very busy. You got the kids, you got the job, you got so much going on. Me, I'm the same way. I got so much going on. I didn't even do Christmas shopping yet. My family's gonna be like, "What are
What?
you doing?"
Oh man.
I got one day, so I gotta like sneak out of the office, and hopefully, Bruce, the owner, is not watching this. He's gonna be like, "Yeah, right back to your desk, McNamara." But
You got to get on that.
yeah, it's just been one thing after another. I was really sick for the past couple of weeks, and just
Mhm.
everybody is passing something around. I also have a couple of questions. People asked me prior to this live, so
Oh,
if
good.
anybody watching now wants to type something in and ask Ron, we'll be happy to share it. So I would probably start with number one. In your industry, with resume writing, I kind of look at it like this way. Tim Grover, Mike Murphy, Seth Riggs, Cheryl Porter. I just throw these names out there because people are like, who the hell are these people? Tim Grover, helped coach and train Michael Jordan. Mike Murphy's been a trainer with the USA athletics team, and Seth Riggs and Cheryl Porter, vocal coaches, like, superstars have trainers or have someone in their corner to kind of help and coach them. And in
Right.
my eyes, that's kind of like what you do. Like, people think, I could do a resume and it looks like crap, and you're trying to get your foot in the door. So I guess the first question, how did you get started in this benefits? What are the benefits of working on a professional resume and having someone like you in their corner?
Yeah, well, I think that was such a great analogy or comparison. And the one that always comes to my mind is Tiger Woods having a swing coach,
Hmm.
which, that's when you first hear that, you're like, you're kidding me, right? Tiger Woods, potentially the greatest golfer ever. He has a swing coach. But, to draw this back to resume writing, although Tiger Woods is potentially the greatest golfer of all time, if there are minor flaws in his swing, or he's just not maxing out his potential, or something's just a little bit off, he may not be in the best position to realize that. Right. So that's why that swing coach is there, because they can take an unbiased sort of outside perspective viewing that swing and point out the flaws in the swing and communicate that to Tiger and get him back on track. So yeah, I think I think that was a great analogy because the same thing certainly applies to what I do, right? I mean, all of my clients are really successful. They're great at what they do. They've established, for my experienced clients, they've established a great career. But in my experience, it can be very challenging for even the most successful professional to write about themselves. What I found is that most people tend to undersell themselves, and they're just so in the weeds of the day to day of their career that when they go to write their resume, they're forgetting very valuable content and experiences. So that's where I come in. I sort of take this outsider perspective, just like Tiger Woods' swing coach. I know how to ask the right questions to get really valuable content and information out of my clients, really compelling selling points that they have to offer, but perhaps they're just forgetting them, they're neglecting them, they're taking them for granted, perhaps.
Yeah, it's so true. I remember, like, my first couple of jobs. I mean, they were local jobs. I'm not knocking them. I actually loved them. If I could retire, some of my first jobs, I worked at a movie theater, was the best thing. It was like 2 seconds from my house. I watched every movie and probably had
Mhm,
pounds of candy every single day. But, when I wanted to kind of explore other options, I really didn't know how to sell myself. Really wasn't that educated. And people asked me about my story. I hated school. I dropped out, got my GED, went right into the military, and then when I came back, I wanted to do something a little bit more. And I really didn't know how to write my own resume. I had
mhm,
somebody else prepare it for me. But once I got into that interview, they would ask me questions and be like, "Oh, I really didn't know how to answer them." Or upsell myself. And some people, they have like a 4-page resume. Some people have like half a page resume. We'll get into the weeds about what's the best resume, and for each
mhm,
person, it's probably going to be a little bit different. But having someone coach you through the questions and kind of guide you on how to answer certain questions, I've always felt is a huge plus. Going through those mental reps and physically doing it will help you for those interviews. And today's day and age, a lot of companies, we'll talk about this, they have ATS, like those automated tracking systems, and upload your resume and I'll type your information in there. Sometimes people get discouraged through that process. So someone like you, I'm sure you deal with hundreds of people who struggle in their search to find a job. Now, you've helped people all throughout the spectrum. We've at Guardian kind of focus on security and
right.
fire safety, but tell us a little bit about the people that you help and
Mhm.
how you help them overcome their struggles in the industry.
Yeah, of course. So regarding the first question, who do I work with? I work with professionals of all career levels. I would say my youngest or least experienced client is typically a college junior or senior. I work with college graduates, and I've worked with clients all the way up to the suite, right? So CEOs, CFOs, COOs, et cetera, and everything in between. There are a handful of occupations and professions that I do not work with, simply because I just don't have expertise in their background. I don't know how to speak their language. There's lots of terminology that is just way over my head. So, for example, I do not work with IT professionals. I typically don't work with engineers, and I don't work with very high level medical and scientific professionals. But for the most part, outside of those four categories, I've worked with clients in pretty much every industry and occupation you could think of.
It's funny because I had a little interview with an IT professional recently. I mean, they
Mhm.
were talking to me. They were a great candidate. Just everything for me was like right over my head, talking about all of the things they do, and I'm pretty sure they're excelling at them. For the layperson, I'm like, I have no idea, my friend.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, when I started this business in 2014, I decided I was going to work with everybody. And
Hmm.
after I worked with two or three IT professionals, I was like, you know what? I'm going to provide them with a great looking resume, but I really don't know what they're talking about. And I didn't feel comfortable that I was putting my best work out there.
Sure.
So I just made a blanket rule that, these are the occupations I'm not working with. If you come from one of these professions, I can connect you with a resume writer who does specialize in your field. So
Yeah.
I've established relationships with fellow resume writers who do have expertise in IT or engineering, so on and so forth. And I love referring prospects to them.
Yeah. I feel, and I'm just kind of focusing mostly on the security guard realm, but I think this applies to a lot of industries where people may uh, they find challenges with their experience. And Miss herself has a great question, which we'll talk about. How would you compose a resume for someone who doesn't have any work experience yet? That's a really good question.
Awesome
The
question.
security guard industry, is always hiring. I could probably name 2 dozen guard companies that are hiring right now this second. You
Hmm.
go on Monster or Indeed, and literally you'll see thousands of guard positions open. So you kind of have to know the field that you want to go into. But if you, and this is just my 2 cents, take that for what it's worth, Miss herself. The security industry doesn't require a lot of experience, but there are different training outlets or opportunities where you can probably get your foot in the door, but depends on the job specifically. Um, Really, really good question. I also think skill sets are important. Sometimes people are entry level to the industry, and that's fine. I always say you got to start somewhere. You got to get your foot in the door and then take the elevator up and kind of, move around.
Hmm.
The other struggle I know, and even I've run into this through my career, navigating job portals. You call up a company or you find a company, hey, are you hiring? First thing they'll tell you, go to our website. Okay, you're on the website now. Where do I go? Some of them have it laid out perfectly right on top. Some of them you kind of have to scroll down and just find out, apply here. And they get discouraged with, uploading their resume, and now they're told to type everything in again. Some companies do that in a way to kind of just, see how much skin you got in the game. You know, all right, you uploaded your resume. Are you willing to type your information in there? But it's also a way for them to pre-screen candidates that they want to interview. Another challenge I think that comes up often for many industries: salary expectations. Obviously, everybody wants to get paid the most amount of money,
Hmm.
and there is nothing wrong with that. But once again, you have to know the expectation. So I tell people, make sure you look at the application and the ad, what the rate of the starting salary is. It's a starting salary. And time management, I think this is very, very big. You have to be realistic with yourself and time management, being able to manage it. If you're going to school, if you have family, if you have kids, other obligations or hobbies as well. Sometimes I just wanted to leave work early because I wanted to go take care of my hobbies. I was collecting coins, I was going bowling. I had a bunch of stuff that I enjoyed doing, and I wanted to make sure that I got there on time. So very important stuff. But it's Miss herself also has another question with that about the services. Ron, are they free or do you charge for those services?
I do charge for the services. I mean, this is my full time occupation. Yeah, I started the business in 2014 on a part time basis. I was still a recruiter at that point in time. And then I believe around 2017 or 18, I decided to go all in on my business. So to answer your question, yes, my services do have fees involved because this is what I do for a living.
Yeah, and I felt them valuable. Me and I can probably name a dozen people who found you through LinkedIn. I always say when you're ready to really excel and go to that next level, you need someone like you in the corner. Getting the documentation ready, getting those referrals, and sometimes people they can see that value. Hey,
Hmm.
this guy or this girl, they know a lot of people in the industry. They can put me in front of the key players that I need to see. It's not that you're bypassing the company's procedures, but it'll definitely help you excel in the long run.
Yeah, of course. So
Um,
what I would just mention to the I'm sorry, the person who made the comment. Yeah, of course, I charge for my services, but follow me on LinkedIn. I try to give out as much free advice and value to my followers as possible. And whether you hired me or not, or whatever the case is, if follow me on LinkedIn. I'm sure I'll make a post every once in a while where you'll have a valuable takeaway.
yeah, different resumes for different jobs. I've always felt you should do that. You can't use one resume for everything. Sometimes it doesn't comply or compute, especially if you're going through like the automated trackers.
Mhm.
What's your take on this?
I'm a big believer in having customized resumes with a clear theme.
Hmm.
So let me give you an example. I'm making some assumptions about your background, Charlie, but I would imagine you could probably have a resume for uh, with a security theme. You could probably have a resume with sort of like a client relationship management theme.
Mhm.
And then you could probably have a third resume that was focused on your security training background, right? So
Yep.
all three of those documents would be very similar, probably a lot of overlapping information, but they could clearly have very clear, distinct themes.
Mhm.
So that if you were applying to a new job, hopefully your boss isn't watching this, but if you were applying to a new job, you could submit one of those three versions of your resume based on the nature of the role you're applying to, right? Because obviously, if you were applying to a role that was maybe client relationship management outside of the security industry, you would want to send them that client relationship management themed resume, not the one
Sure.
that was hyper focused on the security industry, because that just wouldn't resonate with them. And vice versa. If you were applying to a competitor of Guardian, you would probably send the security training or some version of that because that would resonate with them. They're in the industry that you're already in.
Sure.
Now,
You know,
what I would tell people is, if you go on LinkedIn or you have all this resume advice bombarding you, you'll see a lot of advice that says you gotta customize every resume, you gotta tailor every resume, and I do agree with that, but I think people spend too much time on that. If you have a well-developed resume with a clear theme, any tailoring or customization to a specific role should really take no more than 5 to 10 minutes.
yeah, I definitely agree with that. And it's funny because I didn't think about this until now when you mentioned it. I would probably say about a decade ago. I loved my job where I was at. I
Mhm.
was just kind of looking for a little more money, a different change of pace at that time. I was a
Mhm.
director of security. Um, a lot of overtime at that property that I worked at is in the middle of Manhattan, so travel was getting to be a pain in the neck. Just subways in the morning, subways going home. You do an 8-hour shift, but it turns out to be a 12-hour day with
Right, right.
traveling and lunches and everything. So I was kind of applying around to a different location in Brooklyn, a little closer to my home. Must have sent a ton of resumes, but that resume that I was using was my one resume, director of security. That's all I was about at that time. Definitely makes sense because the position I was applying for was more of a compliance role,
Mhm.
overseeing large security teams and venues. So definitely makes sense to have multiple resumes on the job. Um, don't have to go crazy. With me personally, I think my resume usually sits around 2 pages. What are your thoughts on the amount or the information that should be on there?
So let me preface my answer by saying that, in my opinion, there are very, very few rules to resume writing, which is probably interesting to anybody watching this because if you're on LinkedIn or just consuming this type of content, everybody's got an opinion about resume writing, and so many experts will tell you this is the way it has to be.
Hmm.
You have to follow these rules or you're never going to find a job. Um, I don't buy into that. There's a handful of rules, like obviously don't have spelling errors, have consistent formatting, but there's no hard rule around how long your resume needs to be. My philosophy is your resume should be as long as it needs to be. What
Sure.
I mean by that is you need to convey your value proposition and include all the experiences that are pertinent to the role you're applying to. If you can do that on one page, awesome. If it takes a page and a half, 2 pages, awesome.
Yep.
The bottom line is you want to do your best to put yourself into the shoes of the person who can hire you, figure out what they're looking for, what they will find compelling and important, and just make sure that you're communicating that regardless of how long it takes you. I don't even have an issue with a 2.5 page, 3 page resume for certain clients, as
I
long as it's warranted.
Yeah. I on the fire side of things, when I used to hire specifically for a very specialized job, these
Mhm.
guys really had to know fire code. They had to know different licenses, certifications, emergency response. The longer the resume, I found myself the more I would nitpick at certain things. Oh, you're telling me this? All right, so now explain to me the code. And a lot of times they kind of tripped up because, they would just copy and paste something that they see, but not really understand what they were putting in there.
Well,
So
that's
especially.
Right, but to your point, that's not a length of the document issue. That's
Yep.
I'm throwing content on there that I can't defend on an interview issue.
Yes. Yep. So, they wanted to pad the resume just to make it look like they've had a lot of experience. And these guys were really good at what they did. It's
Mhm.
just you have to know what you're putting on your resume. You can't just copy and paste something on there. Um,
Exactly.
you actually mentioned this earlier, and I'm going to share something too because you put out a lot of good information and content through LinkedIn. So this is kind of like, I guess, a standardized, resume. Some tips, as you mentioned, right? Just make sure it's relevant to you, right? Some people get really worked up on the font size and what information should or should not go on there.
Mhm.
But I think this is a really good, clean resume, and I'm going to share one. Actually, I'm going to share two resumes that I got for some people. Someone had asked this question. I just wanted to jump on there real quick. AI
Mm.
versus human interaction for help. What do you think about that?
Oh, I was waiting for that topic to come up. I mean, AI is a topic for every industry, every occupation. Everybody's talking AI. It's a great question. What I would say is, if you need just a basic resume, sort of boilerplate, but written in clear, concise English,
Hmm.
and your budget is under $200, just use ChatGPT. You know, there are a lot of really what I call resume writing mills. These are the
Yeah.
large resume writing companies. Usually, they're charging you like $100. They're not my competition. I don't compete with them. I'm on a whole nother level in regard to my client interaction and the service that I provide. But if you're looking at one of those resume writing mills that's going to charge you under $200, just do it yourself using ChatGPT. Because, in all honesty, if you hire one of those companies, they're probably just going to outsource it to somebody in a different country who's
Yeah.
going to use ChatGPT to write your resume.
Yeah.
So just save the 100, $200, do it yourself.
It's so true. I mean, I've been telling people, no matter what industry you're in, start to learn AI. It's kind of integrated into every field: security, for payroll, for admin, for customer service, for automation.
Mhm.
Just a good skill to have. And there are different skills. People should have soft skills and hard skills. We'll talk about training. Obviously, we're a training school. That's what we do. But what common mistakes? It's Miss herself coming through with the questions, man. It's Miss herself. Good questions, and that's a good one too. What mistakes do you see? I've got a picture, but I'll let you talk about yours first.
No, I appreciate the question. That's a great question. So the most common mistakes that I'll see on a resume are, the basic, the obvious ones: spelling errors, formatting inconsistencies, right? So, like for one instance, on job one, you're bolding your job title. On job two, it's unbolded and italicized.
Hmm.
Maybe the formatting, everything's not quite lined up. Which those things are all important, but in my opinion, the biggest mistake I see, which can be detrimental, is underselling yourself, underselling your background,
Sure.
not adequately conveying the value that you've provided your current and past employers, because that's how you're going to be judged by your future employer. At the end of the day, when you're hired, it's a company taking a bet that you will replicate the success you've had for your previous employers, right? So you need to adequately communicate what you bring to the table. Do you make your company money? Do you save your company money? Do you make operations more efficient? Um, whatever is the purpose of your occupation, you need to clearly communicate that, because that's what's going to guide the interview conversation. And that's the type of, that's the information you're going to use to sort of defend and promote your background to ultimately result in a new job.
These are some of perfect examples that you gave. Grammatical
Hmm.
errors, typos. Hey, Charlie Mack made a typo.
Yeah.
I own that one. um, it's always good to have someone else kind of read through it as well. But making sure things are in the proper tense and spelled correctly. Um, for me personally, I always tell people, be mindful of your email address. These are just some, and these are real email addresses that I've seen throughout the years. We just changed some of them around. So, you know, I won't read them all. You can kind of see them all for yourself, but I thought this was the most funny but frustrating email. It's the 6 A's at 6 A's at yahoo.com. Me and this guy went back and forth trying to spell his email address for like 20 minutes. It was the funniest thing. Just be mindful, right? The sexy man, sexy lady kind of emails. Disposable thumbs. I thought that was a funny one. But
This is a
for
hell of a list, Charlie.
this, I changed, where they go to, but Prank Prince, I have to, be concerned. Hey, is this guy going to be playing around at work all day? Or Killer Mike, is this guy going to, hurt somebody on the job site? Um,
The last
Folks,
one I oh my
yes. Be mindful of
and,
your.
and there might be people watching this who are like, well, what does it matter what my email is? They should be judging me based solely on my background. Yeah, maybe you're right, but that's not the way hiring works in the real world. If you're a hiring manager who's going to devote us, who's going to invest a salary, they're going to invest the time in the interview process, which costs money. Um, yeah, they're gonna read into your email address.
Yeah,
And
you know,
it's just so easy to create a conservative, simple email address with Gmail or any other email provider. Just my philosophy is just create an email address that is some sort of combination of your name. Just keep it so boring. Don't get. I always say landing a job is so hard on its own. Like, don't throw in these unnecessary obstacles, right?
yeah, you hit it right on the nose. I was just about to say the same thing where, I would calculate my day. I was very good with time management. And I would tell people, your interview starts on time. Just always give yourself a little extra time. You never know with the bus, the subway,
Mhm.
LIRR, Metro North. There are so many things that can just get in your way for an interview. The great thing I think now is a lot of employers are kind of going to virtual interviews, which I think is great. But even still, give yourself time to make sure you're set up in a professional, setting and no interruptions. So if I have an 8-hour day and most of my interviews were about 45 minutes, I would always give them a few minutes beforehand to get settled in and a few minutes after for me just to kind of take notes. I would probably interview maybe 7 or 8 people per day,
Mhm.
and I would get hundreds of resumes per day. So sometimes I could not see or speak to everybody. As a recruiter and on the C-suite side of things, I had to process of elimination. Just get rid of the people who resumes did not stack up. Compared to some of the others that you're right. You want to make it easier for the person who's going to receive it. A lot of times I had some good candidates and I would still meet them. They just didn't sell themselves.
Mhm.
Going back to the fire safety stuff, I was a fire guard here. Okay, but what'd you do? Well, I would go on patrols and I would check the inspection tags. I was like, okay, put that on your resume. That kind of information helps explain what you do on a day-to-day basis. Right?
100%. And let me know if you agree, because I know you've recruited, you hire people, but when a phenomenal resume comes across your desk, right? It's there's compelling content, there are accomplishments. You can clearly tell what this person's been doing and what value they've been providing. As a recruiter or a hiring manager, you get excited to call that person, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
And I think this is an important comment I'm about to make. Would you agree that that person, the job almost becomes theirs to lose,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
As opposed to the less than stellar resume, who they're not selling themselves adequately, they're underselling, the content is weak, it's not compelling. You may still call them for the interview, but would you agree that the job is theirs to have to win?
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
Which is a big difference in my mind. Having a job that is yours to lose because the recruiter is so pumped up to talk to you, as opposed to you have to claw and scratch throughout the interview to win that job because they thought you were good enough to call for the interview, but they're not convinced.
Hmm. It's funny you say that. I'm not going to name their names here. But I have 3 candidates that I literally just have them jumped out to me right now. So happy to get them into the interview. Happy to meet them because I knew they would do that job with no issue.
Mhm.
Obviously, we're going to train them. they know the job, but we're going to train them on the corporate culture, train them on the building stuff. So excited to put them in front of the client. And I love to show off. Hey, listen, I got, 3 good candidates. They're
Right.
coming your way. You are going to be making a hiring decision today. And it kind of closes the loop, right? Because for us as a company, we need to hire someone. For them as the client, they have to have someone in the building. And I think those individuals, they really, it's funny. I feel it in me now, like just remembering those days. You get so amped up and hyped up to put those people in front to interview them, and you know that they're a good candidate, and you know that they're going to succeed.
100%.
Um, I always say people really love me or they really hate me because I've made a lot of people a lot of money because you put good people in front of them. Or the people that hate me, they just, they didn't want to live up to that challenge. And it is
Mhm.
what it is, right? Some people, they want to excel and they want to do good. But, especially with technical positions, engineering, security, fire safety, medical, a lot of those folks, they want to shine. And sometimes people find it hard to sell themselves. It's like pulling teeth sometimes in those interviews. Like, how many more questions can I ask you to help
Right.
yourself in the interview?
Right. Now, just one thing I want to add on. Um, it takes more than just a great, phenomenally written resume to land a job, right?
Hmm.
Like resumes don't get hired, people get hired, right? So I'm not saying that if you have an amazing resume, you hire me and I write your resume, you're going to land every job. What I'm saying is you with a very well written resume, you're starting the hiring process from a position of strength.
Hmm.
But then it's on you to continue that strength throughout the interview process. You have to be able to back up the content on the resume and truly sell yourself throughout the interview process.
Yeah, I have another photo I want to share, and this actually goes along with a good question from It's Miss herself. What is your opinion about headshots on a resume? Helpful or harmful? So, great question. I'm going to leave these two up there. These photos were switched out, and the names were changed, but the actual resumes that are shown are real resumes. The contact information the people were taking out. The person on the left for me, that I met with, she was great. And the position that I was trying to hire for was more of a creative and marketing and advertisement
Hmm.
position. So, it's cute. It's a cool resume. It shows, they know how to, work on some visual aids, which I thought was good. The gentleman on the right's resume that I had received was more for a customer service position. So, I was a little taken aback. It's the first time I've actually gotten picture resumes. Um, sometimes people will put graphs or charts or things in there. If it's relevant to the job and you can articulate it, I think it's helpful.
Mm.
Being on the security side of things, I always tell people, be mindful and cautious of what you put on there. I know sometimes the address information now for people is being told to leave your address off of a resume. Your contacts should be there, but your address, for security purposes, shouldn't
Hmm.
be there. But what are your thoughts? Headshots and
Yeah. So great question. Again, I'm going to start with the caveat that there are no rules to resume writing, very few rules to resume writing. Um, in general, I mean, I think if you surveyed 100 recruiters or hiring managers, I think, in my opinion, the majority of the response you would get is don't include a headshot. Could be for legal reasons. A lot of these companies, they don't
yep.
want to be accused of passing on a resume because of the appearance of the person in the headshot, which is an interesting rebuttal considering on LinkedIn everybody's headshot is there.
Hmm.
But I think that is the response you would get from a lot of HR or
Yep.
recruiters. Don't I want to judge you based solely on your work history. I don't include a headshot. Now, that said, plenty of people have certainly gotten hired by including a headshot on their resumes. So I guess what I'm saying is, again, I hate to be wishy-washy with the answer, but there's very few rules to this.
Hmm.
Recruiter A may love a headshot. It may give them a glimpse into this person's personality, like you kind of alluded to with the customers, the first resume to the left.
Yeah, the creative.
Recruiter B could be like, absolutely not, no headshots, right? And unfortunately, you as a job seeker don't know what kind of a recruiter you're submitting your resume to.
Yeah.
What I would say, there's also a handful of occupations where it's the norm to include a headshot. Actors, actresses,
Hmm.
Broadway performers, even in the hospitality industry, which there's a lot of crossover. Like a lot of actors work part-time jobs in the hospitality industry. Um, Also, it's the norm pretty much everywhere in the world outside of the U.S. You know, if you go to Europe or Asia, most of those resumes you do include a headshot and lots of other personal information, which would never fly here in the States.
Yeah.
Ethnicity, religion, number of children. That's actually quite common in lots of parts around the world.
I did not know that. Wow. Learn something new every time we talk, Ron. I did not know that.
Yeah, as
Uh,
Americans, I think that kind of blows our minds, but
we're a very litigious country.
yes.
One other question for you. Tactics and strategies to be successful, right? Because it's not just having, the resume. There are other things, people do to become successful.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say successful job seekers, they use an all the above job search strategy. What I mean by that is they're not only sitting online all day and reactively submitting applications from Indeed or Monster or Career Builder, etc. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. You should definitely devote some time to that activity, but you want to make sure you're doing other things as well, right? In my experience, the most successful job seekers, they're doing a little bit of that. They're on the job boards applying to jobs, but they're also on LinkedIn, and most importantly, they're tapping into their established personal and professional networks. Looking for job leads and referrals that way, recommendations. So all the above. Basically, what I'm saying is like, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't
Sure.
only apply online. Don't only go to friends and family and your colleagues. Don't only sit on LinkedIn all day. You got to do a little bit of everything because you just never know where that next job's going to come from.
Yeah, LinkedIn is such a great tool. I think people really don't utilize it as much as they can. A lot of
Mhm.
people, they sign up, they create a basic profile, they just kind of sit there. They'll add their contacts, but I agree, you have to be super proactive. Today's day and age.
Very proactive. Yeah, that's a great word. Whereas most job seekers, in my opinion, who are struggling, they're very reactive. They're waiting for that job to be posted to Indeed, and they're reactively applying to it, as opposed to getting more proactive, like you said, on LinkedIn or with their established network of contacts.
I have always been a goal getter. If I set a goal, I'm going after it. And, I just wanted to learn about emergency response and NYC CERT, the community um, in downtown Brooklyn. CERT does a really good 10-week program. It wasn't starting till like 4 or 5 months after the fact that I wanted to sign up. But I stayed in contact. It's all volunteer, so you don't get paid.
Mhm.
But you kind of sometimes have to be pain in the butt, just calling, hey, when are you starting? Hey, can I help out before this thing, kicks off? You
Squeaky
gotta
wheel
be
gets the grease, right?
you gotta be that squeaky wheel, right? You gotta go get it. You
They
can't
they
wait.
do they do say sometimes the squeaky wheel gets replaced, but I think that's a worthwhile risk. I think more often than not you're going to get the grease.
Yeah. If I know if I'm not doing anything to help myself, nothing's gonna happen. No one's calling. No one's gonna email me. No one's gonna knock on my door. I've got to go out there and go get it. Absolutely.
That's a funny story you just told, because just yesterday I watched a documentary on I think Netflix. It was about and I'm not a big college football fan, but it was about the cheating scandal at Michigan, University of Michigan, where basically, long story short, there was a a very junior level coach on the University of Michigan team, and his only job was to decode the other team's signs, their signals
Hmm.
from the other sideline. And long story short, they got busted. He got fired, whatever the case is. But the way he landed on the University of Michigan coaching staff was he went to the Naval Academy first, just literally walked into the head football coach's office and said, "Hey, I want a job on the coaching staff." And they gave him like some low level job. They were like, nobody's decoding signs for us, so go do that, right? And then he parlayed that experience to land at University of Michigan, which is a top 10 program.
Yeah.
So that's exactly your point. Like he had the guts to walk in, make an ask, you know, meet the right people, and then he turned it into an opportunity for himself.
Yeah, I would say, there may be that dream job you want. Maybe you don't get it right away, but what are some things that can lead you to that job or with that company for that job? You just got to be in the mix.
Right, stepping
Um,
stones.
you just gotta get out there, folks, and there are people out there, willing to help you. I put out a lot of content for free on our YouTube page at Guardian, and Ron has a ton of great information on LinkedIn. We talked a lot about resumes, and it's funny, it went over my head. I didn't even think about this until now. We're gonna
Okay.
have to get this person like
Yeah.
a sponsorship
Yeah, this
to
is
to,
great.
to just join us live because she's got some good questions. What about a cover letter? Me
Mm.
personally, I've never used them. Sometimes I hate getting them because it's just one extra thing I got to read through. But that's not my field. I'm not the expert, Ron. But what about cover letters?
It's a great question. This is probably one of the top 3 questions that I constantly receive. Um, it's an interesting topic because if you're applying to jobs online, I would say the majority of those roles, they'll instruct you submit a resume or go to this website, submit an application and a cover letter. That said, in my experience as a recruiter and knowing lots of other recruiters and talking to other recruiters, and you just mentioned it, very few recruiters and hiring managers actually read cover letters. So, so as a job seeker, it's one of these weird situations where like you're constantly being told to send one, but the reality is that very few people read them. So it's tough. So what do you do as a job seeker? The first thing I would say is just always follow the application instructions. If they
Mhm.
tell you to send a cover letter, you just have to send one. At a bare minimum, it could just be an exercise in the company seeing if you can follow directions, right? If they
Yeah,
tell you to send a cover letter, are you following that instruction? But maybe the person on the other side is actually reading the cover letter. Um, if you're not sure, I think your best bet is just to have a concise cover letter that maybe backs up the 2 to 3 most important points about your background, and just always have that ready to fire off.
yeah,
If you have a well-written, brief, concise cover letter, there's really no downside in sending it, but there could be potential downside in not sending it and not following their instructions.
yeah. I mean, to kind of date myself. Man, I'm old. I think about this now. You have to fax a resume. So I always thought like the cover letter was like the first page that'll go through.
Yeah,
This way you can get a clean cut resume. I didn't know. I was not an office person back then. But I always thought, the cover letter was supposed to be the first page as it goes through and it gets all messed up. And then your resume is good, because it's the next, 2 or 3 pages in there.
right. Well,
Um,
some interesting psychology, and I don't think a lot of people understand this, but I think also if you polled 100 recruiters or hiring managers, um, if they told you that they do read cover letters, I think the majority would tell you that they only read the cover letter after they've looked at your resume
hmm,
and like what they see. Whereas most people think the opposite. Most people think, oh, my cover letter is my chance to sell myself even further, and then they'll pick up my resume. I think in most cases it's actually the reverse. If your resume is not getting the job done, they're not even going to read your cover letter.
okay.
And it makes sense, right? It's very time consuming to read a cover letter. So a hiring
Yeah.
manager is not going to devote that time unless they already like what they see on the resume.
Yeah. And, that's one key thing, folks. I think Ron and I will tell you the person who's actually going to get that resume, whether it's by email or fax, or even if you bring it in person, they're going to need time to read through that, decipher it, follow up. So make sure your contact information is up to date. Another question that actually just came in: how should a person follow up? Is that important, or is it overkill?
Um, No, I'm a big believer in follow up. It's kind of a delicate dance. You have to do right. I think what the heart of the question is, how do I reiterate my interest without coming off like a stalker or being annoying or being too aggressive, right? So it is a fine line you have to walk. I don't have like a silver bullet answer because
Yeah,
every recruiter or hiring manager can interpret follow up differently.
yeah,
Recruiter A may see the follow up as, "Oh my God, you're a stalker. Leave me alone. I told you I would get back in 2 weeks." recruiter B could see follow up as, wow, this person is very interested, they're ambitious, they're invested in this role, in this process, in our company. So that's why I keep saying there's very few rules to this, because at the end of the day, hiring comes down to people, and people are different. They view things differently. They have different philosophies. So um, I guess to give you an answer, my question would be, if the recruiter gives you a timeline, like, hey, we will have an answer within a week, let's say a week and 2 days goes by, I don't think there's any harm in a delicate reach out. Like, hey, just following
Yeah.
up, you said you'd make your decision around a week. I just want to reiterate my interest in the opportunity, and just wanted to check in about the process.
My very first security job, I was definitely that stalker type. Done with my interview, left, got back on the train, went home, 10 minutes, email. Thank you for interviewing. I look forward to hearing back from you. Didn't hear back from him. The next morning, I'm up. Hey, just wanted to check in. Still no response. The next day, for 3 or 4 days, I constantly followed up. I landed the job. The HR manager's like,
Interesting.
I told you I'd get back to you. I was like, yeah, I know, but listen, let's end this. Hire me. Let's go. I was right out of the army, didn't have a job. I was looking to make money. It worked out for me, but being on the other side, I could see that being, somewhat of a nuisance, or, hey, why is this person, being this way? Are they going to be like that on the job site where they're
Right.
at?
But I think you
Um,
made a great point also, that you would send a thank you note after your interview,
yeah,
which, a lot of, again, if you go on LinkedIn, there's lots of great content. There's lots of content I don't agree with. You'll see a lot of content on LinkedIn that, oh, the thank you note is outdated. And, when you interview, does the company send you a thank you note and this and
yeah,
that? Listen, I think manners will never go out of style. There's no downside to sending a thank you note. There is potential upside to sending a thank you note after an
yeah,
interview. Like,
yeah,
let's just say, for argument's sake, you're competing with an equally qualified candidate, that the company loved you, the company loved this other person. You send a thank you note, the other person did not. That could be the difference maker, right? There's
yeah.
no downside, but potential massive upside to doing so.
I would say I would always remember the people that, send an email after, or they called, hey, just wanted to thank you. This
Mhm.
is so and so. And I would remember their name. I was just, focused and locked in with stuff like that. So I always say it's helpful. It's always good to maybe wait. I live by the 24-hour rule. If I
Mhm.
send you something, I'm going to give you 24 hours to get it, read it, and then give you 24 hours to respond. Just be mindful. People are people, and people have jobs. So if you are reaching out, be mindful. They might have hundreds or thousands of resumes. They may not always get back to you right away.
Mhm.
So sometimes, slow your roll a little bit, folks.
Yeah, I think that 24-hour rule is smart for sure.
Because right now, I mean, everybody can reach me with instant access. They can reach me here. They can call my office. They can email me. They can get me on LinkedIn. They can get me on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and all
Mhm.
the other stuff. So we've gotten very accustomed for like an instant answer
Right.
to things. Alma's got a great question. Alma, good morning. What source is recommended to create a resume? He's right here. Come
Yeah.
on, Alma, Ron. This guy, he makes resumes. That's what he does. Job coaching. He does it all.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I want everybody to hire me, but in all seriousness, no, I'm really not a fan of the sort of pre-made templates.
Mm,
They're very limiting. When I work with a client, I do everything by eye. I'm kind of like a Microsoft Word dork, so I know how to like manipulate all the formatting and make everything clean and consistent. You can certainly use a template, but I just think it's very constraining. It ties your hands. But you could, to answer Alma's question, that is an option to just to find a pre-made template and sort of plug and play your content into there.
yeah. And for those folks who are just turning in, we've had like 30 people pop in, drop some questions. We'll try to get to all of them as we can. If you're interested in Ron's services, you can catch him by email, ron@readresumes.com. You could also catch him on LinkedIn as well. Definitely add him to your contacts. We're gonna have to start paying her for these questions.
This is great.
she's
Keep coming.
she's good. She's locked in. I gotta ask. It's Miss herself. Are you actively looking for a job right now? If so, let us know. We're happy to help you. And this is actually a really good question, because this was definitely me in the beginning of my security career. I worked for a guard company, I
Mhm.
worked for a guard company, and I worked for another guard company. I did basically the same job. So how do you prevent redundancy
That's an
with work
awesome
experience?
question. Yeah, that's a really great question. So my remedy to prevent against redundancy is to think about the unique qualities of each role. Like, what are the things
Yeah.
that you just can't be redundant about? So, like in your example, Charlie, you were doing security job. The nature of the work was probably the same, but I bet you the context of the environment you were security guard in changed, right? So, for example, maybe in job one, you could provide some context around the property, like, um,
Hmm.
delivered 24/7 security at a 30,000 square foot hotel comprised of 100 rooms and this and yada yada yada, right? And then because that's interesting context, it lets the reader know where you were security job, what type of environment, right? And then maybe job two, it's delivered high end security at um, a retail banking branch. Maybe include the annual revenue of that branch or whatever. Just interesting, compelling content and context that makes each role unique.
Yeah. It's so funny because I've actually had this with two jobs that were very similar. So I'll talk about just my retail experience first because I worked uh, Blockbuster, which is an awesome place.
Uh,
People are like, Blockbuster, what the heck? Wow, this guy really is old.
my brother worked at Blockbuster back in the day.
And then I worked at Hollywood Video, which was their competitor.
Yeah.
But it was all right. So why are we going to hire this guy from here? Well, he worked here and he did X, Y, and Z. So when I went to Hollywood Video, I was able to reduce their overtime. I became a manager,
Mhm.
so it helped save money on overtime costs. Same thing within security. I was able to articulate, at building A, it was a 64 floor building above grade and 3 stories below grade. We did patrols every hour. I was like, okay, well, I kind of do the same thing at job two, but it's very different. It's at a hotel environment. They had 2,400 guests on a daily basis, so we were
Right.
able to articulate what do we do at each property. They don't want to just say, I did this, I did this, I did this. Why is it important that you do this? Right? Are
Exactly.
you saving money? Are you bringing down costs? Because that's what the employers want to know. Why are they going to make that decision to hire you? It's Miss herself. Good questions. Last question I have: feedback. How should someone take feedback from an interview? I know a lot of times, the interviews wrap up. Thank you, Charles. Pleasure meeting you. Have a nice day. We'll get back to you.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times they don't make that decision right there on the spot.
Right. So, are we talking about like negative feedback or just like next steps post
Next
interview?
next steps post interview. Yes.
Yeah. So I think it's similar to the question I was asked a few moments ago, just about like how often should I follow up. So just to reiterate, I think a best practice is within 24 hours send that thank you note.
Hmm.
A, just reiterate your interest in the opportunity, but B, gratitude. Right. Never goes out of style, and certainly will never work against you.
Yeah.
Um, and then from there, I think it's very important to follow the company's instructions, right? So if they say we're going to have an answer within a week, or we'll get back to you within a week, give it at least a week, right? Like
Yeah.
give them the courtesy of and the opportunity to live up to their word, their promise. If it extends beyond a week, I do think there's nothing wrong with a light reach out. Obviously, you mentioned that you were constantly pounding on the door, and it worked out for you. You landed the opportunity, but especially in this job market, there's so many great people out of work, which means that these recruiters are pretty overwhelmed. They're doing tons of interviews. They're sifting through lots of resumes. So again, just not to beat a dead horse, just give them the courtesy of, um, you know, give them the opportunity to live up to their stated timeline. If the timeline comes and goes and you still haven't heard from them, some light follow up. But what I will say is just never put all your eggs in one basket. Don't put all
Yeah.
your eggs in one opportunity, all your hopes in one opportunity. You got to keep it moving. Don't stop looking for other jobs until you sign the contract and you officially have a job offer.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I always say, job searching is like dating, right? And you don't want to be that clingy stalker who's like obsessed with one person, right? Because if it doesn't pan out, then you're devastated and you have no other options. I know that's an interesting comparison, but it's so true. You don't want to be that clingy stalker who's so invested in one opportunity in one company. You got to keep it moving, and have lots of irons in the fire, as they say.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny because I say it this way. Like, I've always been a loyal guy. I've been with one company for usually a very long time,
Mhm.
but I've seen people, job hop and just test the market and see what's out there. And a lot of those guys, they kind of swim in the same circles. They know a lot of the same people, and they
Mhm.
know the same networks, and they know the same company. But you're right. You got to, get your name out there, and don't get stagnant too, because on the other side, if you're laid off and you have to jump back into the market, some people may already have an edge over you, because they know some of the players that are in the game, ways to reach people as well.
Oh, for sure.
So for those folks who are interested in his services, definitely check it out. It is well worth it. Ron is a great guy. You can find him on LinkedIn. You can send him an email. And for those folks who are looking for work in the security guard industry, Guardian Group Services is ready, willing, and able to help you out. Security is not going away anytime soon. They need security for commercial, office buildings, hotels, retail stores, public assembly areas, nightclubs, venues, parties. We got all the holiday stuff coming up now. So if you're interested, send your resume to jobs@guardiangroupservices.com. Jobs@guardiangroupservices.com. It's a great way for us to help you land a gig in security. Ron, this was great. Right on time. We hit like the hour mark, just like we planned.
Oh, it's an hour already? Wow. Oh,
Hey,
yeah. Wow. That
goes
was fast.
by like that. I got to go back to work. My boss is going to pull me back in a minute, but great stuff. I really wanted to thank you for your time. Really, really good content to help a lot of people out there.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I hope our discussion, helps some job seekers out there and maybe dispelled some myths, or maybe I confirmed, some best practices that you're thinking about. It was great to catch up. I know the last time we did this was, I think, 21, which was a very different job market than what we're going through right now. So, yeah, always a pleasure to chop it up with you.
Yeah, it's funny. I watched that old video to now, and I just think about, the two very different job market, essential workers,
Night and day.
and now, like, there are a lot of people hurting and really trying to get back into the workforce.
Yeah, well, I mean, when we last spoke a couple of years ago, that was sort of at the height of the PPP funding. So all these companies had all this cash. They were over hiring. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of layoffs in the last 2 years. So yeah, very different job market than when we last spoke, for sure.
Yeah. Best way to reach you? Through email?
Email. I'm always on LinkedIn. You know that. Find me on LinkedIn. My website, readresumes.com. The email's ron@readresumes.com. Definitely LinkedIn. I just launched a Twitter or an X, whatever you want to call it. Find me on there as well, posting some unique content there.
Awesome. Ron, thank you so much. Happy holidays to you and your family.
You too, Charlie. Appreciate that.
We won't treat you bad. I know you're an Islanders fan. I'm a Rangers fan, but we wish you the best.
We're both having absolutely brutal years.
Tough hockey season.
Oh.
I can't even watch anymore.
So bad.
Take care, buddy.
Charlie, take care. Have a good week. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Woo!